Just joining. We're going to get started in just a moment. For those of you who just got here, I'm really excited to have you in the space. I was saying, please grab what you need to be present today. We'll be with each other for about an hour. So, yeah, whatever that looks like for you, would love to hear it. All right. Well, with that, I think we can maybe get a kick in, folks. Welcome to Growing Through Conflict, Tools for Relational Community Work. Our webinar today is going to be about an hour long. My name is Yas, and I'll introduce myself in just a moment. I'm also joined by my colleague Mairead, who will be monitoring the chat and has so lovelily, is that a word? Lovelily supported with our slides today so that I can also view my speaker notes. Yeah, if you have any questions throughout the day, there's a little Q&A section, so feel free to put it in. Otherwise, let's get it going. So, like I said, my name is Yas, and I'm dedicated to relational community building through transformative and restorative practices. I believe in the vitality of place-based and local level change, returning to the wisdom of the beyond human world. I also try to emphasize co-creation, collaboration, and reciprocity in my work. I aim to drive meaningful systems change through community-led collaborations and collaboratives. And what kind of informs this work is I hold an MA in adult education and community development, as well as I've been certified in transformative mediation and conflict coaching skills, and have been a mediator in community for quite some time now. I'm committed to lifelong unlearning, and my approach to community work is rooted in the pursuit of just futures for all. A little bit about me outside of work. I'm passionate about my hairless cat Newman, who might make a little appearance throughout. We'll see if he's feeling a little spicy. I'm also passionate about being a part of my local land trust, community arts, mind, body, spirit connection, which is a somatic practice, earthwork, journaling, and my kin. So that's a little bit about me. Thanks for listening in. We can go to the next slide, please. So, some tech considerations for today. We are joining virtually and remotely. We got you covered, so you will receive the full recording of this call or session, as well as the collection of links and resources that will be shared. Yeah, please join the conversation using the Q&A panel on your Zoom client to submit or vote if there's anything. I don't think we're doing any voting today, though, that you'd like us to address. And technical support. Yeah, you can use the chat panel to ask for technical support throughout the webinar. Next slide, please. So we want to create a respectful virtual space today. So as a Tamarack learner, which now you are, you're agreeing to center equity, inclusion, and a sense of connection across all people. Our priority here at Tamarack and our responsibility is to protect the safety and well-being of our staff and members of our learning community. So that's you, myself, Mairead. And so by participating in this event, you agreed to participate with openness and a respect for all. I hope we can honor this. If at any point you feel that that is not being honored, don't hesitate to let us know. Otherwise, we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, we're going to do some acknowledgements and grounding together before diving into the content. I'm sure you folks have heard of land acknowledgements, and I'm going to offer one today just to get us a bit more started. So next slide, please. All right, so let's take a moment to ground together. I'm going to paste in the chat for everyone. For your own learning, if you want, you can take a beat, think about how you and your family came to these lands. There's a great resource, native-land.ca, for those of you in so-called Canada. If you aren't familiar with the lands, whose lands you're on. I ask that you take this a moment to listen and reflect again on your own journey in relationship to this land. So, as part of Canada's colonial history, non-Indigenous peoples have benefited from what the Truth and Reconciliation Committee defines as the cultural genocide of Indigenous peoples. So, we acknowledge our role and responsibilities in the national reconciliation process and recognize our accountability for this living history. We each gathered together today from different parts of these lands. Many indigenous peoples named Turtle Island, which has been the home for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples and their ancestors since time immemorial. As a guest on this land myself, I was born and raised in Takaranto, which is the Mohawk name of Toronto and is part of the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Tekaronto is also covered by Treaty 13, which was signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and is part of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between Indigenous nations to share and care for the land and its resources in a peaceful way, both of which hold deep cultural and spiritual significance for Indigenous peoples. From coast to coast to coast, we honor the ancestral and unceded territories, as well as the contributions of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples who call this land home. And so, as we come together in this region and others, we are reminded of the ongoing impact of colonization and the importance of meaningful reconciliation. So, by acknowledging our presence here, we commit to listening, learning, and supporting the rights and sovereignty of Indigenous peoples. And we carry this awareness with us as we engage with one another and the land itself, recognizing the privilege of being here as a settler and the responsibility that comes with it. And we recognize that at the foundation of this is building relationship and trust. So thank you so much for taking that time with me. I'd love to go to the next slide, please. I love this quote. It's something just to ground what we just talked about in our acknowledgement. It's from Robin Wall Kimmerer, who is an incredible author. And you might have heard of her book, Braiding Sweetgrass. She has a newer book called The Serviceberry, which is about abundance and reciprocity in the natural world. And she offers this, which I feel like kind of just informs a lot of the relational approach I take, which is know the ways of the ones who take care of you so that you can take care of them. Introduce yourself. Be accountable as one who comes asking for a life. Ask permission before taking. Abide by the answer. Never take the first one. Never take the last. Take only what you need. Take only that which is given. Never take more than half. Leave some for others. Harvest in a way that minimizes harm. Use it respectfully. Never waste what you have taken. Share. Give thanks for what you have been given. Give a gift in reciprocity for what you have taken. Sustain the ones who sustain you, and the earth will last forever. And I really just love that quote as a way to kind of ground why we do land acknowledgements, what the purpose is beyond just a statement. How can we go deeper in our relational approach to both the land and the people who are here? Next slide, please. So at Tamarack, we do African ancestral acknowledgements. This might be a newer practice for some folks. And just to acknowledge that there are so many gaps in Canadian history, education, and incredible author and just educator, Dr. Afua Cooper offers a incredible let me just paste it in the chat here. An incredible video that I would totally recommend you folks taking a deeper look at, which examines over 400 history of Black people in Canada. So I want to offer first a quote that she lands her African ancestral acknowledgement and flow into my own. So Dr. Afua Cooper in this video says, quote, for these 4 centuries, Black people have contributed vastly to and shaped Canadian history, society, culture, and heritage from coast to coast to coast. Black people in their capacities as enslaved persons, Maroons, loyalists, refugees, sailors, soldiers, freedom seekers, scholars, nurses, fur traders, immigrants, educators, porters, musicians, composers, politicians, students, artists, writers, scientists, and more explorers, and have built this country. Yet these achievements and contributions have been diminished, marginalized, and at times erased. We often begin Black Canadian history with Matthew de Costa. He comes to us as the first documented Black person in Canada. That is, we have a historical document, a record of his presence, first being here in 1608. And it's important to emphasize that Da Costa was a free man who had linguistic, interpersonal, and cultural skills that the French found useful, unquote. So, as I'm thinking about that and thinking about the gaps in Canadian history, it kind of grounds us as why we do African ancestral acknowledgements here. And I want to also acknowledge how settler colonialism within the Americas is deeply invested and entrenched in the transatlantic slave trade and its legacies. So we honor those ancestors of African descent who were forcibly and violently displaced into chattel slavery here on Turtle Island, including in so-called Canada. We honor those ancestors whose stolen lives and stolen labor were foundational to the wealth and infrastructure of the societies we now inhabit. We acknowledge the legacy of slavery and colonialism not as relics of the past, but forces that continue to inform the present. We acknowledge that the descendants of these ancestors continue to endure the afterlives of slavery and systemic and individual racism and exclusion and in the ongoing denial of justice, yet live on in the bodies, memories, and daily lives of Black communities. We hold space for this truth and emotional, spiritual, and physical toll it takes. And we pay tribute to the visible and invisible labor of those who work every day to challenge anti-Black racism, to hold space for grief and healing, and to envision new systems rooted in equity, care, and belonging. So may this acknowledgement deepen our commitment, not only to remembrance, but also to repair. So thank you. Next slide, please. I wanted to also offer this another quote just to ground us in why we do these types of acknowledgments, but also in this present moment. So there's this incredible poet and author, Cameron Awkward Rich, who offers this poem called Meditations in an Emergency. Recognizing right now we're in such a time of flux and change and urgency, I just want to name that like we're feeling this, right? And I think this poem really offers a grounding into that. So he says, I wake up and it breaks my heart. I draw the blinds and the thrill of the rain breaks my heart. I go outside, I ride the train, walk among the buildings, men in Monday suits. The flight of doves, the city of tents beneath the underpass, the huddled mass, old women hawking, roses and children, all of them break my heart. There's a dream I have in which I love the world. I run from end to end like fingers through her hair. There are no borders, only wind. Like you, I was born. Like you, I was raised in the institution of dreaming. Hand on my heart, hand on my stupid heart. And I just love that again as a way to acknowledge that we are people living in the world. We're going to be talking about conflict, and so much of that is being replicated in our systems and in our relationships. And yeah, I just really love this poem. So thank you for taking this time to really ground together. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so I would love to offer this prompt as we kind of get into the webinar. First, folks might have heard of, the zones of learning. Most people are familiar with the comfort zone. This is the area that you are in most of the time. You know, they say 80% of people live here. This is not a bad place to be. It's actually a really great place to offer reflection and grounding. But we want to try and push today into that learning zone, right? So, or it's called the growth zone, an area where you can take in new information with curiosity and stretch beyond your own beliefs. But being mindful of the alarm zone, that red circle, we don't want to hit that. So if at any point today you're finding yourself kind of checking out or not being able to process, just being aware of your own body's needs, please participate as you would like. You don't have to agree with everything I'm saying here today, but I just want us to be able to take in new information. So as we talk about that, I would love for you folks to take a moment and explore your own assumptions about conflict. When you hear the word conflict, what comes to mind? What do you believe to be true about conflict? Where it shows up, what it looks like, and how people typically respond to it? Think about your personal experiences, or your workplace, or your community, and even how conflict is viewed culturally and socially. So let's hold that as we kind of go into the rest of the webinar today. I'll be offering a few other reflection points that I hope you take. All right, next slide, please. So I love this offering that um, our Diesel team that Mairead is a part of, shared when talking about this work. Conflict is a part of growth. How we manage it determines the strength of our communities. I think that is such a good way to think about what conflict transformation actually means and what it means to be doing this work differently. There's another offering I heard in community in my own practice where folks talk about the difference between conflict and trauma is how we care for each other afterwards, right? So I love these different ways of thinking. We'll talk about mindset shifts a bit later. Before we do so, let's kind of ground together in even what I'll be meaning when I say conflict. So next slide, please. So we can define conflict today as a serious disagreement or argument due to opposing interests, needs, desires, or values. It's a perceived opposition by one party against another. Sometimes it could be more than just two, of course, but just as an offering there. It can manifest emotionally, psychologically, physically, occur internally, but all the way up to systemically. And conflict navigation is the process of guiding individuals or groups towards conflict transformation. It focuses on moving through disagreements constructively. Next slide, please. So we also want to ground in what principled struggle is. So a Black feminist and left roots leader. Oh, next back one side. Sorry, Mairead. Thank you. Um, and Tanya Lee created a framework that includes a central idea that our struggle must be for the sake of deepening our collective understanding and achieves greater unity. So her guidance is to be honest and direct while holding compassion, take responsibility for our own feelings and actions, seek deeper understanding. We ask first and read first. Consider that this meeting, gathering, etc., may not be the container to hold what you need to bring. And five, have side conversations and one-on-ones to help us get better and build us up, not only break us down. So again, some of these key ideas that we'll be talking through today that I really think are important as we kind of get into what transformative conflict can mean. So next slide, please. Also, I love seeing the chat coming in. Thanks for the folks saying where they're calling in from. This is great. Okay, so let's talk about the different types of conflict or the kinds of conflicts that can occur. So you'll see on the screen, for those of you joining through the webinar, if you click this screen, like on the shared screen, sorry, you should be able to zoom in. If it's a bit small, let me know. But I'll still speak to this. So you'll see five kind of consecutive circles going from interpersonal conflict all the way up to systems conflict. And so, just to kind of address what that actually looks like, each level of conflict, right, it requires a tailored approach and consider its unique characteristics and the context in which it occurs. So first, when we think about intrapersonal conflict, it's that or internal struggle within an individual, usually involving like conflicting desires, values, or emotions. When we think about interpersonal conflict, it's disputes between individuals, so more than one, often arising from personality clashes, misunderstanding, or competition. Then we go to that third bubble or circle, which is group conflict. So those are the tensions between different groups, which can be based on competition for resources, ideological differences, or social and cultural divides. Then the fourth wave there, the fourth circle, is organizational conflict. So disagreements within an organization, often stemming from differences in goals, priorities, and power dynamics. And then we got that big guy out in the last bubble there, the systems conflict. So those widespread issues within a society, such as political polarization, social inequality, or civil unrest, its disputes or incompatibilities within or between complex systems, including those social, organizational, technological, or ecological systems. So the reason they're kind of like stacked in is to say that at the center, there's always space for interpersonal conflict. We always are navigating our own tensions within the self, but to name that as we go broader, they all influence each other. So, as we're thinking about conflicts today, just thinking about the ways in which conflict can show up is really important. But before we kind of keep diving in, would love us to tune into our personal cues and needs. So, next slide, please. Sweet. All right, next slide again. Thank you. So, our relationships with ourselves, our feelings, our thoughts, and perceptions shape how we engage with the world around us. Just as Cameron Awkward Rich reflected on the beauty and heartbreak of existence, we too can explore the intricate tapestry of our emotions and experiences. When we nurture a deeper understanding of ourselves, we become more open and curious about others. So, this self awareness allows us to recognize the interconnectedness of all beings and the environment we inhabit. Just wanting to know, like, notice and take a minute for you folks to notice your own feelings right now, right? We're coming into a convo about conflict. It's gonna bring up stuff. Maybe taking in your environment to ground. So again, I have some plants around me. I'm looking out my window. And then an invitation into curiosity, right? Again, as we're going through today, if you have things that are coming up for you, please don't hesitate to put it into the chat or the Q&A section for us to kind of unpack together if we can. So just taking that moment to notice as we kind of get into some harder stuff. Next slide, please. This quote I feel like is super important as we think about like why does conflict happen? It's happening a lot right now. The World Health Organization names that social isolation and loneliness are important yet neglected social determinants for people of all ages. So when we think about our social determinants of health, what's allowed us to be present, what should be allowing us to have a dignified life. A lot of those things should include our ability to be socially connected, but oftentimes that's dismissed. So I would love to share the next slide. Just to ground us a little bit more in some of the findings from the social connection guidelines that came out this year. This is Canada's first public health guidelines for social connection, emphasizing that social connection is a major driver of health and well-being. And I think is super connected to when we think about relational work and conflict as well. So just to kind of name what we're seeing on screen, we're seeing that 13% is the estimated percentage of people who experience loneliness or are often lonely. 30% of people, this is Canada, there's an increase in odds for premature death among lonely people. And then 69% is the portion of people who know someone who's chronically lonely, right? And so these things are super important to be thinking about as we talk about what are those underlying factors that kind of go into why people are showing up the way that they are or why you might be. Next slide, please. So I love to acknowledge, it is hard to build relationships, especially as an adult. Forming meaningful relationships and connections can be difficult due to our busy schedules and established social circles and the complexities of adult life, right? Many adults experience feelings of isolation, making it essential to actively seek out and nurture relationships within community. And building relationships require intentionality, vulnerability, and a willingness to engage with others. So, just some things to think about as we're talking about what it means to be in relationship with folks and some of those barriers. So, let's talk about identity and going beyond the self. So hopefully some folks here have seen this on the right side of the screen, the intersectionality bubble. But let's start on the left side. So I love circles. You'll see a lot of circles going on. So when we think about identity, it refers to the different parts of who we are shaped by our background, experiences, our environment, and how society sees and treats us. Identity is both personal and social. It's how we see ourselves and how we're seen and treated by others. When we think about our social location, it's the combination of our identities and social positions that shape how we experience the world and how others treat us, right? So identity is part of our social location, but social location is really about how we are in regards to like who we're in the room with or who we are in society. It includes things like race, gender, class, age, ability, sexuality, religion, language, immigration status, education, housing, and more. Our social location influences our access to power and safety and resources. It shapes how we experience conflicts and systems. So when we see the circle on the left there, that's I can never say this person's name, Bronfenbrenner's Brenner's ecological systems theory, which really is talking about the different types of, I guess, systems that kind of make up who we are or influence our identities. So we have in the center the individual, and then we have what kind of makes up some of our individual states. So that's microsystems. So those immediate environments where direct interactions occur, such as like with family, friends, school. Then if you go one wave out, we have the mesosystem. So those are the connections between microsystems, like relationship between family experiences in a school life. We have the exosystem. So those are external settings that indirectly influence a person's development, such as a parent's workplace, supportive policies that can affect an individual's well-being and sense of belonging. Then we have that macro system, so the broad cultural and societal context, including socioeconomic factors and cultural values, inclusive societal norms that promote a collective of sense of belonging as well. And then on the very last one, we have chronosystem, which is the dimension of time, reflecting life transitions, historical events, changes over time that can alter one experience or your experience of belonging. And then when we think about intersectionality, it's a way of understanding how different parts of our identity, such again as like race, gender, class, and ability, interact and overlap, sharing our experiences in these more complex ways. It helps us see that we don't experience life through just one identity at a time. Systems of power, again, like racism, sexism, classism, often work together, not separately. And also, some people face multiple layers of disadvantage or marginalization at once. And this is just something to think about as we kind of talk about what does power actually mean. So, next slide, please. So, what do we mean by power? Let's talk about it, right? Power is such a big, vague term, but today when we're talking about power, it's the ability to influence, access resources, make decisions, or shape outcomes. It can show up in different ways. So that personal power, that could look like confidence, voice, agency, positional power, so authority based on role or status, for example, a staff versus a resident if you're working in housing, or structural power built into systems like housing, policy, funding, often reflecting historical inequities. And it's important to name that power is not always about intention, right? Even well-meaning actions can have harmful effects depending on how power is held or used. Next slide, please. So, as we talked about those kind of like different systems or interconnective elements of what goes into the self beyond identity and how that kind of shows up, when we think about how that affects belonging, here at Tamarack, we think of that micro level of belonging. So, the relationships with family and peers, it's kind of like the me, right? The meso level is those neighborhood factors that we were talking about. So, I can think of that as like the we. And then those macro elements or macro level pieces, so the economic and societal structures, the us, all of those things kind of factor into when we understand or how we understand a sense of belonging. We'll go to the next slide. So just to again ground in like what do we mean by social connection? Why is belonging relevant here? When we think about social connection, it's the extent to which an individual is socially connected. It depends on the multiple factors, including connections to others, a sense of connection that results from actual or perceived support and inclusion, and the sense of connection that to others that are based on positive or negative qualities. It's really influenced by the structural, the functional, and the quality of all of these types of relationships. So just something to be thinking about again as we're going in, tuning into the self as we talk about conflict. Next slide, please. Okay, communication isn't neutral. I just wanted to share this because the way I'm speaking about something, it might resonate, sometimes it might not. And we often think of communication as a soft skill, right? Active listening, clear speaking, kind words. But communication is also a form of power. It asks us to think about like who speaks first, who decides what's off topic, who gets interrupted, who gets to be silent. These aren't just habits, they're a part of a power system that shape how we experience conflict and connection. And conflict in our work isn't just emotional, it's often structural, as we were talking about, and communication becomes the battlefield or the bridge. And so we have some ideas of like what we can do to make our communication better. Instead of speaking first, inviting others to speak first. Instead of debating a point, naming what's at stake for you. Instead of assuming silence is consent, a big one, checking in with the quiet voices. Instead of saying, we all agree, asking who's not in the room. Instead of solving quickly, asking what is the alternative. So, just some more food for thought as we kind of think about what the role of conflict is and how it shapes us. This is a little bit of an individual prompt for you folks just to think about as we continue. So let's take a moment to reflect on your own identity and what goes into it. I love this approach that's been adapted from the relational approaches to identity-based harm training with the community justice initiatives in the Waterloo region. It asks us and it reminds us that, like, hey, depending on who I'm in the space with, what my identity backpack will look like changes. If I'm in a room with just my friends, certain parts of my identity are more important and other parts might not be, right? If I'm in the room with a lot of folks who are all Black, then maybe race doesn't play as big of a role in how we're showing up together. So, as you think about today and some of the conflicts you might be navigating or the spaces in which you occupy, a prompt would be to identify 6 key aspects of your social identity or social location that shape how you show up in your role or your position today. At the bottom, you'll see kind of a chart of common social identity and location categories, things that people might not always think about, I think, that are really important to like flag are things like, um, body size or ability or your education level or your if you have an accent or your immigration status, right? Things like birth order. You're like, what does that mean? But hey, if you're in a context in a family dynamic, birth order really plays a huge role. So just thinking about how your different identities show up when you're in conflict or when you're in a different role and what are those main ones in your identity backpack today? All right. We kind of dove into like the self. Like I said, we're wanting to ground before we kind of go externally. But now let's kind of talk about these 5 common conflict styles. So this was adapted by the Thomas Kilmann conflict model. It outlines 5 distinct styles, each with a unique approach to conflict. And so you'll see this chart again. If you can zoom in, that would be great. Hopefully it's legible for you. But we have these 5 styles, and just to kind of ground what this looks like, I'll start in the top right corner and weave my way through. So let's start with competing. Oh, and to name that on the X and Y axis, on the X, you see level of cooperation. On the Y, you see level of assertion. So how cooperative you are and how often you're willing to like say what you need, right? So when we think about competing, that's high assertiveness, low cooperation. It's a style where one party seeks to assert their needs or desires, often at the expense of others. It's use, because I like to flag when things can be useful, right? Not everything is bad, even if the names sound a little spicy. So its usefulness or use is in situations requiring quick, decisive action or when a strong stance is necessary to protect oneself or others. It could sound like, I'll take charge here. I'll take charge here. If we kind of drop into the center there, we have compromising. So that's that like moderate assertiveness, moderate cooperation. So you're willing to listen, you might be willing to share, but you're not doing too much. It's a style that aims to find middle ground where each party makes concessions to reach an agreement. Its use or usefulness, it's effective when time is limited and a quick resolution is needed, helping to prevent the escalation or the idea of an escalation of a conflict. It could sound like, let's meet halfway on this. Let's meet halfway on this. Okay. If we go into that bottom left corner, we have avoiding. So that's low assertiveness, low cooperation. It's a style characterized by sidestepping of conflict, often to maintain peace or avoid discomfort. Its use could be useful when the issue seems trivial or when the potential damage of confrontation outweighs the benefits, allowing for reflection and emotional processing. Could sound like, I prefer to let it go. I prefer to let it go. If we go all the way across to that bottom right corner, we have accommodating. So those are high cooperative and or high cooperation and low assertiveness. It's a style where one party prioritizes the needs of others over their own, often to maintain harmony, right? Its usefulness is effective in preserving relationships, at least at the surface level, and fostering a supportive environment, right? Especially when the issue is like less important to one party. That could sound like, I'm okay with whatever you decide. I'm okay with whatever you decide. And then we have on that top right corner, collaborating. That's high assertiveness, high cooperation. So it's a style that seeks to find a mutually beneficial solution by valuing the perspectives and needs of all parties involved. It's ideal for those complex issues where multiple perspectives can lead to innovative solutions and healing relationships. It could sound like, let's find a solution together. Let's find a solution together. So, by recognizing these styles, we can navigate conflicts a bit more effectively and promote a bit more of healthier interactions, weighing the benefits and costs of each approach. We can go to the next slide. If you know me, then you know that I bring a trauma informed lens to everything. And again, these styles at first glance might seem like, okay, I get it. But let's kind of think about what are those underlying factors as to why folks might be, tending to be in a different style or why you might. So, with competing, right? Some of those underlying factors, it may stem from past experiences of feeling powerless or overlooked. It's that fight response, which is often used to assert control or dominance, can be a defense mechanism against perceived threats, can be reinforced by environments that reward competitive behavior. When we think about collaborating, the underlying factors are common amongst individuals with backgrounds emphasizing communities, support, and connection. So those like collectivist approaches. Those folks often value dialogue, cooperation, and empathy. These individuals might often lead with, oh, it should say openness, not puppeness, and curiosity. Compromising, often used to avoid potential deeper conflict by seeking a middle ground or like what you can see as a middle ground. It might be rooted in experiences where confrontation led to negative consequences, and it reflects a desire to reduce tension and avoid escalation. When we think about avoiding, shout outs to the avoidant folks. I know that I can be that way sometimes. Conflict may feel overwhelming, leading to withdraw or removing oneself. This response can be a protective mechanism. Individuals may have been in situations where confrontation was dangerous or silencing, and may experience that fear of conflict, so they do not like address or acknowledge it, right? And then we have accommodating. People pleasers, rise up if you're here. This is driven by a desire for acceptance and to not be in conflict. It may stem from neglect or emotional unavailability in the past. Individuals may have learned to please others as a survival strategy and often require sacrificing your own needs by prioritizing others' needs over your own, right? So just wanting to go deeper beyond that tip of the iceberg as to why we or others might be showing up in these styles. Next slide, please. Thanks for running through this with with folks, or running through this with me, folks. Another prompt to get you folks thinking. I love this source. Big shout outs to Sylvia Chu on our team who took the Collective Change Labs Healing Centered Systems Change course. They have this really great offering about thinking about you in relationship and in groups, thinking about your cues of danger. So, noticing these cues can help us navigate ourselves in group fields and help our leadership facilitation of others. So, you'll see these triangles on screen. They're asking you, like, what is a cue of danger or threat for you? So for me, that might look like shouting. If people start shouting, I clamp up. I don't like that. That I know that, hey, for me, that doesn't feel good. Other people shouting, you're used to it. You're okay with that, right? So I'd ask you folks to think about what are some cues of danger or threats that you notice that you can get reactive to? As you're thinking about that, think about your bodily response. So, what do you notice in yourself, right? How does that look? When I hear shouting, I again clamp up, I get sweaty, I go nonverbal. I'm like, I don't know how to deal with this, right? My body gets really tight, it feels heavy. And how do you manage that response is the next question. So, for me, in that scenario or example with shouting, I often leave. Hey, that might not be good, might not be bad. It's just what it is, right? We're approaching this with neutrality. We're just noticing what we need. So thinking about these things can be helpful for you folks as you're thinking about, hey, in conflict, I'm noticing when someone uses the word cold, hey, that triggers me. Or when someone does XYZ, I'm noticing a bodily response. How do we start tapping into those cues so that we are aware and we have that noticing when we're in conflicts with folks? Next slide, please. Just like danger, what are our cues of safety, though? So, again, these can help us navigate ourselves in the group, especially when we're facilitating. So, what are those cues of safety? For me, an example could be like a cue of safety is when someone, we're in conflict and they check in with me and they're like, "How are you?" Oh, you're asking me how I am. I feel a little bit more calm. It makes me feel like you care, right? Or when you reflect what I just said back to me as an offering, that active listening, maybe that's a cue of safety. I notice that I feel safer when these things are in place. What is that bodily, again, or emotional response? What do you notice in yourself? So when I'm feeling safe, my heart rate kind of slows down. I feel able to kind of like take deeper breaths. I feel a little bit more loose. I feel a little bit more giggly. What do you notice, or what do you do as a result of that feeling of safety, right? So for me, when I'm feeling safe, I feel way more able to engage with people. I feel way more able to be present, less dissociative. Again, things to notice as you're thinking about going into highly tense situations. What are those cues that you can notice and bring into those spaces around what you need to feel safe? And what are those like, yeah, just triggering or cues of danger that can show up and activate your body. So again, just some thoughts, but some food for thought. So again, think about a time when you tried to engage with someone or a group who had a very different perspective, background, or set of priorities than your own. Happens all the time, I'm sure. I'd love to hear again, assumptions are a huge thing, right? What assumptions did you bring into that interaction? What helped you build trust or got in the way of building trust? And what would you do differently now? Hmm. Many thoughts. Let's keep that as we continue. So let's get into understanding these key concepts of conflict transformation. All right, next slide, please. I love quotes, if you couldn't tell. They help kind of ground theory into practice for me. So I love this collective wisdom in conflict transformation. Adrian Marie Brown says, there are examples of emergence everywhere. There's an art to flocking. So staying separate enough not to crowd each other, but aligned enough to maintain a shared direction and cohesive enough to always move towards each other. Emergence is beyond what the sum of its parts could even imagine. So thinking about transformation means we're going to be doing different things, but how can we move together in a way, even if we're not fully in agreement, moving towards alignment? So next slide, please. Most folks, I'm sure, are familiar with resolution or conflict resolution as a lens. And I just wanted to do this quick side by side because it's like, oh, what's the difference? Why are we talking about transformation? So when we think about resolution, the focus seeks to reach an agreement that satisfies immediate needs of those conflicting parties. Its approach could look like mediation, arbitration, negotiation. The outcomes, the issue may be resolved. Sweet, but those deeper systemic issues can persist. So when we think about what the difference between transformation and resolution is, transformation, the focus is to seek to shift and change the deeper paradigms, structures, relationships that fuel conflicts by transforming the underlying conditions. Again, going beyond the tip of that iceberg. The approach, it can include all of the above, so the mediation, arbitration, negotiation, but also it includes dialogue, community engagement, so going beyond necessarily just the two parties, having some other wisdom involved, structural change, and a commitment to unlearning and learning, of course. The outcomes, it addresses those immediate conflicts, so it's still doing the same as above, while committing to addressing those deeper systemic issues, fostering healthier relationships. So let's kind of dive into what that actually looks like. Next slide, please. So I love nature, and I think this tree is a helpful way to be thinking about like what does conflict transformation actually mean? So conflict transformation, I think, is vital in today's world because we are more interconnected than ever with workplaces and communities that are increasingly diverse in backgrounds, beliefs, and values. And I think conflict often signals those underlying issues that need attention, as we've been talking about, such as, again, issues around unmet needs or different values. So you'll see this tree diagram that can deepen our understanding of the keys to approaching conflict through a transformative lens rooted in restorative justice and integrating social cultural sensitivity and competency, holistic approaches to address conflict with an emphasis again on healing and community involvement. And just to name, what is restorative justice? Simply, it's a framework or for addressing harm that focuses on repairing relationships, accountability, and healing. And the key principles there is bringing together the person who's caused harm, the person who's been harmed, and community members when appropriate. It emphasizes accountability, making amends, and reintegration rather than punishment. And it seeks to answer who was harmed, what are their needs, and who is responsible for addressing those needs. So through this, we can kind of see that all of these things are interconnected and needed to be present in a conflict transformation approach. Next slide, please. All right, let's talk about what trust is, right? Again, very vague word. I think about trust in regards to conflict transformation is requiring empathy first, so understanding and acknowledging the experiences of others. Transparency, that's a huge one. Ensuring that the processes are open and clear to all parties involved. Transparency builds trust, period, right? Consistency, applying rules and procedures fairly and consistently. Can you define a word with the same word? I just did it. Thanks for hanging. And then accountability. So taking accountability for actions and their impacts. All right. A lot there. This is just, again, bite-sized chunks to get you folks thinking. This next one, I'm going to share a video. So, Mairead, if you don't mind, I will do that. Awesome. Okay. So when we think about what are the obstacles in accountability, can folks see my screen? Hopefully. I guess there's no like way. Okay. Married. Hopefully we can see the screen. Yes. Okay. Sick. Awesome. All right. I'm gonna play the first 3 minutes of this video. Hopefully you can hear it. And just to talk about the complicated vibes of accountability. All right. Oop,
Is to really
Can you hear
build the
this?
muscle of accountability.
Sorry, I think I have to keep my video unmuted. You might hear some heavy breathing. Sorry. All right, let's try again. Hopefully you can hear it. Let me know.
What gets in the way of accountability? So many things get in the way of accountability. I think one of the first things is that as a culture, we haven't been socialized to really build the muscle of accountability. Accountability is really hard work. It's not just, oh, right, I did something wrong. I'm just going to say I'm sorry and it's going to be done. We all know those people who do someone tells you, hey, that really hurt me. And they do the, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I did that. It's totally right. You're totally right. That is not accountability. That is actually still about the person, right? Feeling a lot of shame or shame spiraling or trying to make it better. But it's not really saying, oh, I really recognize that I did something that hurt this person, that I had an impact on them. So accountability requires a lot of listening to what is it that this person's trying to tell me that I did that impacted them. Folks really just want to be seen and heard and understood. And it requires a ton of self reflection. Like, do I have enough inside of me? Do I got myself enough to know that if someone's telling me that I harmed them, that I hurt them, that I'm not going to fall apart, that I'm not a bad person? All those things that a lot of folks go through when they feel like confronted with something that they've done wrong. And in order to do that, they have to work a lot on themselves to be able to get to the place where they can be accountable.
In my personal experience and like the experience of people I love and care about, it feels like shame gets in the way of accountability. Like
Mm.
shame and all of the things that are the fears underneath shame. So, like for me, for example, I feel really terrible when I've done something wrong, really, really terrible, and really afraid of losing belonging. Like that the person's going to be like, you're terrible. That thing was terrible, and you're terrible, and you suck, and like you're that kind of person now, and I don't want to be around you anymore. Um, so like shame and then fear of loss of belonging, loss of connection, um, of being judged like everywhere I go. And I think that like in my experience at least that shame separates. Like shame is something that keeps me from other people. Shame is something that I've seen folks like makes them either become super like I when I feel ashamed, I become super hyper focused on myself so that I actually can't be accountable to anyone else because I'm so feeling like embarrassed, not wanting to be seen, overwhelmed, guilty, like that it's actually all about me. And that to get to accountability, I actually need to move past shame to actually be able to show up and be like, hey, I'm here to be able to respond to you and not make you have to caretake me in my shame. What have seen.
Okay. Thanks, folks. Marie, if you don't mind sharing again, as we kind of round out. I know we're near the end of our time together. Um, and I just lost my slide, so that's great. Okay. So yeah, as we talked about, or as they talked about, I think shame is a huge barrier to accountability, right? And so many of us kind of get caught up in that shame, get caught up in the, oh no, I've done something wrong. And like they said, it blocks us from actually hearing the person that we've harmed or hurt. And it blocks us from also accountability, not only to them, but accountability to your own growth and knowing that we aren't our mistakes. How can we move beyond that, right? That restorative justice or transformative justice approach is asking us to do it in a way that is repair focused rather than punishment focused. So as we continue, we can go to the next slide. So thinking about the importance of building relationships, it's that foundation of well-being, that social support, the enhanced community engagement pieces, the personal growth, all of this can lead to a sense of belonging. Next slide, please. So, principles of that relational approach, right? We have the bottom, like, oh, broken heart, sad. How can we get up there into flourishing? Centering equity, so prioritizing the voices and the experiences of marginalized communities, embracing discomfort, so recognizing that growth requires vulnerability and a willingness to sit with that discomfort. It's practicing curiosity, so approach conflict with the intention to understand, not defend or win. And that repair, right? Commitment to acknowledging harm and working collaboratively towards solutions. Next slide, please. So, three key mindset shifts for transformation that you'll see in the tool. I've been trying to do a more energized way to go through that tool that was linked in the webinar. But the first is seeing beyond those immediate issues, right? We've been talking a lot about that today. What's going on at the tip of the iceberg? It's just that band-aid, right? We need to go deeper. How can we see beyond, hey, this person just said they're pissed off at me for being late to the meeting and they just scolded me, right? Hey, that's a fair thing to be like, whoa, 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 whoa. But what might be going on under there? What maybe have been the patterns? Have I been late consistently? Is this person under a lot of duress or stress? How can we go beyond that first, I guess, framing of the conflict? Then it's balancing those short-term and long-term perspectives. So again, with the transformative approach, we want to be able to address what's going on right now, right? We still need to do the mediation. We still need to have these conversations. And how are we shifting the systems or structures at play that are like festering and creating some of these injustices that lead to some of those like conflicts that are showing up? So that could look like people want a 30-minute lunch, or we currently have a 30-minute lunch, let's say. One person is like, hey, I need an accommodation for an hour. It's become a conflict. If we were just doing the short term, we make the accommodation. You know what? We can wipe our hands. This person's no longer upset. If we're addressing those long-term perspectives, it's maybe shifting the structure to make it an hour-long lunch for all folks involved. So that, hey, next time someone needs that accommodation, it's already built into our structures. We don't have to keep addressing the same things. Surface level, easy example. It's always more complex than that, but just to get us thinking about what I mean by short term and long term. And then shifting perspectives from an either or to a both and when appropriate, right? How can we go deeper in this way to not see things so black and white, not a us versus them or me versus you? How can we collaboratively come together and think about ways that we can go into a mindset that allows us to see that complexity? Okay, next slide. All right, I leave you with 3 minutes for reflection or questions. We can go into the next slide. Okay, so just check out prompts for the group. Would love to hear how this is landing for you in the chat if you want to share. Is there a new approach to conflict navigation that you want to try out in the future? Are there any insights into your own patterns or reflections that are coming up? And then just some like takeaways that I'd love to plant these little seeds for you folks to water. Write down one or two key takeaways that could shape how you handle future conflicts in a more generative or principled, struggled way. This could be a strategy, a new perspective, or simply a reminder to approach similar situations again with empathy and curiosity. So, that is me. That is a quick deep dive in an hour into relational practices to grow through conflict and conflict transformation. I hope that this was landing okay for folks. We have some spaciousness, been monitoring. There hasn't been anything in the Q&A specifically. I haven't been monitoring the chat super close, but if there's anything that's coming up, would love to hear it. But before folks leave, maybe I'll leave you if you want to continue this conversation. I'm seeing that it's not enough time. I feel you. I do have an upcoming workshop on let's talk about conflict, where we kind of get into these things a bit more practically, hear from each other, do some more peer relational work. It's on November 20th. Would love to see you folks there. Also, I offer conflict coaching services. So if you want support in navigating some conflicts, don't hesitate to reach out. I appreciate you all taking the time out of your day to sit with me. And yeah, sending you all off with really good care. I'll stick around in case there's any questions, but really, really appreciate all the time and energy today. Thanks, folks. Have a good afternoon or morning, wherever you're calling in from. Have a good day. Bye, folks.